3, 4, 2.
Guys, I want to start off with some breaking news right here. This is a smoke scene rising from Idaho National Lab, which tests advanced nuclear energy. If you guys ain't got any more information about that, just go ahead and post it in the comments. So share what you know, especially if you're from that area. There's so much going on in the world right now, so many connections you can make to things. We're going to do some of that tonight. But most Americans are oblivious to just how fragile things are right now. Like, things are not good, but so many people tell themselves that, oh, everything's fine. You know, this is just fear porn, these sort of things. Things are bad. They're catastrophically bad. And we're on it's like which piece of hay is going to break the camel's back, or which needle is going to break the camel's back, however you want to say it. We're there. So Tucker Carlson had Colonel Douglas Macgregor on his show recently discussing the Ukraine war and the potential outcome. And I'm going to play this clip. We're going to have some dialogue about it. But a lot of things he's saying may shock you. A lot of things he said are things that we've been saying, and he just solidifies those things. But the real meat of what he's saying is I think maybe some people realize. I've thought about it, I've talked about it. But most Americans don't really understand, and he digs into that, and I'm going to add some commentary to that. So let's go ahead and play this for you real quick. It's not real quick. It's actually a pretty long video, but let's get into it.
Pretty much everything that NBC News and the New York Times have told you about the war in Ukraine is a lie. The Russian army is incompetent, they claim. Ukraine is a democracy. Vladimir Putin is Hitler, and he's trying to take over the world. Thankfully, the Ukrainians are winning. None of that is true. Every claim is false, the last one especially. The Ukrainian army is not winning. In fact, it's losing badly. Ukraine is being destroyed. Its population is being slaughtered in lopsided battles with a technologically superior enemy, or scattered by the millions to the rest of the globe.
So let me just cut in real quick. It's not being reported, not really, but the thing is that Ukraine is losing people so badly. They're getting maimed, wounded, and the problem is they don't have reinforcements. Okay, they're actually like trying to make people, threaten them to serve. People are fleeing the country that don't want to take any part in this. So they're in very, very bad shape. And you may think that doesn't matter, but it's everything. Okay, so let's get back to Tucker here.
As refugees, Ukraine is running out of soldiers. As that happens, the question will inevitably arise, who's going to replace them? If the Ukrainians can't beat Putin, who will? The answer, of course, will be us. American troops will fight the Russian army in Eastern Europe. That's most likely. And the assumption is we'll win. But will we win? Probably not. The U.S., says Macgregor, is on the brink of a catastrophic war that could very easily destroy us. Few Americans seem to understand that, but they should.
I think all of the law.
Let me just stop real quick, because I saw a comment, and this is the kind of dumb stuff that I hate to see. This guy here, Psalm Courier, saying Tucker's just a carnival barker. He wouldn't discuss building number 7, saying he would debate any conspiracy. That's a lie. He actually has talked about building 7. He said the media would cut him off if he talked about it. Get your facts straight. I hate these people repeating shit that ain't true. Quit repeating shit that ain't true.
Lies that have been told for more than a year and a half about the Ukrainians are winning. The Ukrainian cause is just. The Russians are evil. The Russians are incompetent. All of that is collapsing. And it's collapsing because what's happening on the battlefield is horrific. Ukrainians now, we think, have lost 400,000 men killed in battle. We were talking about 350,000 a few months ago. In the last month of this supposed counteroffensive, which was to sweep the battlefield, they lost at least 40,000 killed. We don't even know how many people have been wounded, but we know that probably upwards of 40 to 50,000 soldiers are amputees. We know the hospitals are full. And we know that Ukrainian units at the platoon and company level, that's with anywhere from 50 to 150 to 200 men, are in piecemeal fashion surrendering to the Russians. Not because they don't want to fight, it's because they can't fight it.
Most people have no clue that in
I hate this freaking ads. All right, back to it.
And commanders are saying, well, if I can't evacuate my wounded, I'm going to surrender because otherwise the wounded will die. And so they call the Russians, and they all speak Russian, and tell them on the radio, look, I've got 50, 60 wounded here. I'm going to surrender because I don't want them to be killed. And the Russians from the very beginning have always treated the Ukrainian soldiers very fairly.
So let me just say this too. One of you guys just said that U.S. troops are there. Yeah, they are. I know that for a fact. Michael Newman talking here. Also, what else is going on is there's U.S. mercenaries there, civilian contractors. So, yeah, U.S. has a hand in the pot. Trust me. I reported on this like maybe a year ago that they had U.S. Special Forces there. They had CIA there, and they've been there. They've sent a lot of people there. I've known people that's been there. So in uniform, U.S. military guys that have been there.
And very gently. And so they know they're not going to be abused or mistreated. They know they can actually be exchanged for Russian prisoners in the future. So they're surrendering. And I think we're going to see this army that we've been spending so heavily on increasingly melt away. And at the same time, as we're talking, if you look at this long banana-shaped strip of territory in southern Ukraine that the Russians control, if you go to the northeastern corner of that, south of this city called Kharkiv, there are major offensive operations taking place there right now. And the Ukrainian forces are being swept away in front of the Russians. And again, all of this happens in a way that is just not reported in the West. And in the meantime, rather than admit that this is a terrible tragedy.
So he's saying it's not being reported in the West. Yeah, it's not. They're lying about the numbers. But it's true, and this is Colonel McGregor. If you're just tuning in, Colonel Douglas McGregor, it's true, and I'm going to prove to you why that's true in a moment. Zelensky would not be saying the things he's saying if it was not true. He's terrified. He's going to get killed. He's going to lose his country, probably be put in prison. But there's other things to this too. It's not just that. There's so many factors going into this that that's why it's so volatile. This is one of the most volatile things we've gotten ourselves into, and there's a lot of reason why we've gotten into it as well. And we'll touch on that in a moment.
That should be ended on humanitarian grounds, if no other. That the killing should stop, as President Trump said, stop the killing. We're going to continue, and this puts the Russians in the unhappy position of marching further west. Because from the very beginning, Putin and his advisors were never interested in a war with NATO or the United States. That's why you've had such incrementalism, this slow grind of movement forward, defensive operations for a long period to build up the force, and then continued offensive operations. They have over 300,000 combat troops in reserve in Russia. And I think they're sitting there and not being released to fight because President Putin anticipates the possibility that we will intervene in Western Ukraine. And if we intervene in Western Ukraine, the Russians will be ready for that. And the consequences for us and for NATO will be devastating because we are not ready to fight the Russians. Yeah.
So obviously, and I'm going to talk about that, in a moment. But let me actually just get to that real quick. So Zelensky says that if Putin isn't stopped, we'll be at World War III. That's what he says, right? Let me throw this up just so you can see it. Always like to have my facts squared away. And we'll get back to Colonel Douglas McGregor here in a moment. Zelensky warns Putin could cause World War III. Zelensky says in this interview that Putin will use the threat of nuclear war to stoke instability in the United States and Europe. I think that he's going to continue threatening. Zelensky said he is waiting for the United States to become less stable because we're already towards that path. We're unstable now, but we're going to get less stable moving into 2024. Okay. Zelensky says he thinks that it's going to happen during the U.S. election. He will be looking for instability in Europe and the United States of America. He will risk the use of nuclear weapons to fuel instability, and he would keep on threatening. So Zelensky's mentioning 2024, okay? And what, if you read between the lines, what he's saying is that unless it's a Democrat, that we will be in World War III. That's what he's essentially saying in this article. But we all know Democrats want World War III. They're warmongers. That's what they want. They're in bed with Halliburton, Lockheed Martin, and all these other guys, the defense manufacturers. So, in my opinion, they will most likely stoke it. They're going to stoke it, especially if they're losing in the polls, like they already are. They're doing very poorly in the polls. We believe that they're going to inject Michelle Obama right there at the end. Joe Biden didn't have a chance in Hades to pull it off. He's just about destroyed America in 3 years. The 247 years and 303 years is about to kill it off. The way I see it is that Zelensky wants Americans on the front lines. That is his ultimate goal. And go from a proxy war to direct kinetic combat operations. And I've got a clip of him pretty much saying it here. Let me show it real quick.
US will have to send their sons and daughters exactly the same way as we are sending their sons and daughters to war, and they will have to fight because it's nature that we're talking about, and they will be dying, God forbid, because it's a horrible
Yeah. So that's what he wants. He wants U.S. troops on the front lines to fight a war for him. Okay. He's a puppet. We know that. He was installed. Okay. Biden and Zelensky have old ties. Zelensky's done dirt for Joe Biden. Trump tried to put him onto that. And then you recall they tried to get Trump for that. Okay. Money's now getting funneled through there. Billions of dollars are showing up missing. Weapons are showing up missing. Weapons are being showing up in other countries. So that is showing just how dark this thing is. Like, this will lead us to World War because they cannot lose it. Too many things will be exposed if they lose, and the amount of money we put over there. So they can't let, the Democrats can't let, they'd rather torch the place down, have us in nuclear war, than to lose. I'll get back to the Tucker video now and hear Colonel Douglas McGregor, because he says a lot of other things that I really want you to hear, and a lot of things I really want to add some commentary to.
Why?
Oh, I think the readiness has been on the decline for a long time. You've had an almost steady, uninterrupted decline in the discipline.
We've talked about this. I've been talking about this almost every week for the past freaking 3 years. They're talking about LGBT, dividing people by race, destroying the military, destroying the teamwork. They're adding females to combat arms units. They're doing everything they possibly can to destabilize, kill discipline. There's no discipline. There's nothing but individualism in the military now. You have trans soldiers dressing in trans in uniform. It is completely evolved into a just woke Marxist group. You'll see these leftist soldiers making TikTok videos talking about they will, when martial law happens, they'll come basically kill Americans. So this is where we're at.
Discipline that makes soldiers fight. Discipline is a tough thing. We don't always understand it. Discipline is really a form of habit, and you build those habits over time through repetition, but you also build it under stress, under pressure, so that it sinks in. And then you build cohesion within the framework of those units. You don't build cohesion when you're dividing the force on racial grounds, when you're pushing people who are clearly unqualified up the ranks to command, when you're rewarding people for anything other than demonstrated character, competence, and intelligence. All of those things are demoralizing, destructive to military.
So I also talked about this in the special operations community. They said they want to get rid of guys with beards and Oakley glasses. They want to put a more diverse group in special operations. So it's not about being the most qualified individual. And those individuals just so happen to wear Oakleys and have beards. I mean, there's literally freaking U.S. Army officers writing this. They wrote this, Oakleys and Beards. They want a more diverse group. And they say more, did they say morally intelligent? I think that's what they said. Something to that, some nonsense, some BS. So 100%, the military is weak across the board. Because when you do that, you have to lower the standards, right? And when you lower the standards, you operate at a level of your weakest link. Okay. And when you have an influx of these, and then they're pushing guys that are not qualified to lead units up in the officer ranks, the most woke officers are now in charge. That's who's going to be leading the forefront. Do you think Russia's doing that? Not a chance.
Establishments. The Army and the Marines are suffering with it. So is the Air Force and the Navy. And there's no easy fix. And these cracks, they're just cracks at the moment, will become giant fissures if you go to war.
So you spent the bulk of your adult life as an Army officer, went to West Point, commanded troops in battle. You're a combat veteran, decorated. But you entered the Army right at the tail end of Vietnam.
That's right.
When it was famously at its nadir.
Yes.
How would you compare the readiness of the current U.S. Armed Forces to, say, 1975 at the end of Vietnam?
I think that in terms of morale and discipline, we are close to where we were in the late 70s. We have a lot of people that are confused about what needs to be done. We've lost a sense of what's right. In other words, you don't have people that have served long enough in formations to know what right looks like, so that you can see a battle group, whether it's a battalion size or brigade or larger, and you know what makes things work. You know what it takes to fight in battle. We don't have very many people like that because since 2001, most of the fighting has been on a very small scale against a fleeting enemy, running around in sandals with an AK-47, relying heavily on explosives, mines to kill.
What is the real story of January 6th?
I want you to look at this propaganda. What is this? So yeah, I want you to listen to this next segment. This is the very real important part I want you to hear, because I got a lot to say about this right here. Let's get back to it. Sorry, I guess I need to get an ad blocker.
7% of our losses were really a result of explosives that came from mines. This is not an army that is accustomed to fighting anybody who can fight back. If I were going to compare it to an army, a better comparison would probably be the French army before the Franco-Prussian War, because the French had fought Mexican bandits, Mexican rebels. They'd fought Arab bandits, Arab insurgents. They'd had a little experience fighting disgruntled, demoralized European troops, Austrians in northern Italy, but they hadn't faced a truly modern enemy. But people were convinced that the French army was the greatest army in the world because they'd fought in North Africa, Indochina, Mexico, all over the world. That war was a catastrophe for France, and that army was decimated in months by a Prussian army that was a modern force, highly disciplined, very competently led, trained, and equipped. So we're not there. We have equipment that is decades old. The tanks that I served on, for instance, when I went to war in 1990, were virtually brand new, state of the art. Those tanks are still out there. They've been rebuilt, but they're not new anymore. They're no longer as capable as they once were. I'll give you a quick example. We have a turbine engine in the M1 A1 series tanks, and that turbine engine burns up as much fuel sitting still as it does moving, because it's a turbine engine. It was designed to be used on an aircraft. We put them in the tanks. So that means you've got an 8-hour tank. Every 8 hours, if you're operating, you've got to refuel this thing. This thing also burns fuel at a very, very high temperature, over 1,000 degrees. And there are 40 plus connections around the engine that are very brittle, that can easily cause fires if accidentally they touch these little tubes that carry various types of fluid, if they actually touch this engine that's burning so hot.
So let me just stop this for a moment. What I want to say is that what he was talking about is we hadn't fought a modern military. Now, a lot of the scholars and what have you says, well, the military, the U.S. military is combat proven. Not against a modern army. When's the last time we fought an actual modern military? Very, very long time. Okay. Fighting guys running around in sandals and AKs is should have blew through them. Obviously, a lot of that was due to politicians tying hands of, because we probably would have blew through them. But the arguments always is with these guys is they're like, well, China's not combat proven. China's more disciplined. Russia's more disciplined, right? And they have a bonding culture, regardless of how bad it is in China. They still have a bond based on culture. They've destroyed our culture here. They're taking down our forefather statues. Next thing will be destroying the flag and the Constitution. So, do you really feel confident fighting in conventional warfare against a modern military unit? The Afghanis didn't have fighter jets. They didn't have nuclear weapons. They didn't have aircraft carriers. They didn't have tanks, right? They didn't have these things. They literally made bombs and AKs. So when you look at how many lost during the global war on terrorism, was it like 4 to 7,000, something like that? I can't recall, some number like that. You're going to be looking more like at World War II numbers, hundreds of thousands of people dead, hundreds of thousands of people maimed. If you win, I don't know that we would. Not with the current military. Of course, we have technology, right? So do they. Do you think we really have more technology than they have? You're lying to yourself. You know, if you ever heard, I forget his name, but he worked in the CIA, and he said, man, when I got to the CIA, he said, I was hoping that there was some kind of shadow government somewhere because I was not impressed with the intelligence of the CIA. So, and talking about the woke agendas within every single government agency in military. You know, you almost have to be to get promoted in the military at this point. Let's get back to the colonel here.
So the engine is so hot that you can track the movement of U.S. Army ground forces with tanks from low Earth orbiting satellites.
So, yeah, you know, this is the thing. That's what he's talking about. You're able to track movement very easily. Like, you don't even need cutting edge technology. That's fighting a modern military is a completely different thing. Completely different.
So if you think you're going to hide or conceal yourself or outpace somebody, you're just a glowing target from space. To this must be added the ridiculousness of not having replaced that engine with a reliable state-of-the-art diesel electric engine, which is much cooler, which can go for 24 hours.
And you know, mil-spec gear, they go to the lowest bidder. I've done government military contracts with our gear before, right? For escape and evasion, for special operations units. And literally they say, hey man, if they want to buy from me, they say, hey, you got to beat this price. We got to get the lowest price, right? Because they watch the channel. They have a, you know, loyalty because they're followers of my channel. So they try to hook me up. But the thing is that it's not like they're going out there and doing the best, you know, getting the best. So,
or more without a refuel. And these things are extremely problematic when you go to war because you have to pull forces back, refill them, return them to the front. That's not easy to do when you're operating as frequently as every 8 or 6 or 9 hours. They say, well, we put I guess a generator on there to make up for this when you're sitting still. The problem is that you don't sit still for very long in combat, because if you do, you're going to be targeted and destroyed. And that, of course, is what we're seeing in Ukraine. Persistent surveillance from space, from overhead surveillance, makes everything visible all the time. So if you're going to embed yourself in the ground, if you're going to set up a permanent position there where you try to fire from that, you're going to be targeted and destroyed very, very quickly.
Within moments, you're not going to make it. Ukraine don't have combat experience either. So, of course, Russia is dominating them. They don't want to tell you that, and people will sit there and argue, no, they're not, because you're listening to CNN. You're listening to these leftist propaganda agencies, right? These leftist propaganda intelligence agencies. They're fooling you.
So that's why this defense right now looks a lot like World War I, because anybody who moves is identified and killed. The only limitation on your ability to target and destroy the enemy is ammunition. The Russians, of course, have no shortages whatsoever. You recall at the beginning of this, we have all these shortages, right? The Russians can't keep up with missiles. The Russians can't keep up with shells. Well, they have multiple manufacturing facilities operating 7 days a week at 24 hours a day. We have no surge capacity in the United States. It would take us many, many months to come up to that kind of standard where we could actually compete.
They said, and I talked about this the other day, and I showed the article, that it's going to take 3 years for us to get our stockpiles back up from what we sent to Ukraine. Like, we're already short. Like, we couldn't go to war if we wanted to.
In high-end conventional warfare. And that's why people like me and others worry that if we get into a confrontation, that we cannot win because the world has changed, warfare has changed, integrated air defenses will knock virtually everything that flies out of the sky, that we will then fall back on a nuclear deterrent, a tactical nuclear weapon that says, if you keep advancing, we'll have to use a nuclear weapon. We don't want to go there because the notion that there are so-called...
And then it has to be who does it first. Let's pay attention to what he's saying now. With modern weaponry, you're not having jets flying over. You're not calling for air support because they're going to blow that thing out of the sky. Automatically. It's going to pick it up, target, boom. No drones. Boom, gone. No call for air support. Hey, man, it's all that's done. Like, it'll be such a short, quick war. It's not going to be some 20-year war. It'll be so short and quick, and people get decimated because it's going to be, mutual assured destruction. And it's going to be whoever is the most offensive first. Who deploys the nuke first? And do you think they have it in them to do it here? No, not a chance.
Tactical nuke, you've heard that expression?
Yes.
Oh, that's just a little nuke. So that won't precipitate a major war. The use of any nuclear weapon is going to precipitate escalation very rapidly because your opponents will assume that if they don't use their nuclear weapons, they're going to lose them. So we're living in a terrible dilemma right now. The smartest thing that we can do is end this war.
What is Russia's objective, do you believe? Assuming the objectives change over the course of a war.
Of course. Right? Well, the original objective, obviously, was very different. I mean, if they'd made peace with the Russians back in, let's say, March or April, I think the Russians would have retained very little territory, probably only Luhansk and Donetsk, the two so-called breakaway provinces. And I think there would have been guarantees of neutrality for Ukraine and guarantees of equal rights before the law for Russians. And that's what people don't understand. Most of this has to do with abuse.
So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. I want to move on to some other connected things with this. But let's touch back real quick on what he said. Modern conventional warfare will be nothing like we've seen. None of our lifetimes. Okay. I believe it'll be quick and rapid. It'll resort to nuclear weapons quickly, and it'll be whoever fires them first. Somebody's got to have the balls to go ahead and do it. Okay. So Zelensky to U.S. lawmakers, Ukraine will lose. Look at him pleading to get us into war. This is from today. Zelensky says that U.S. lawmakers, Ukraine will lose the war without U.S. aid. I mean, this was just redid. I mean, they just updated the article. So he pleaded Thursday to Capitol Hill, telling them that without a new funding to combat Russian aggression, Ukraine will lose the war. And what he goes on to say is basically that America will wind up having to fight, essentially. So keep them at bay, because what he says is that they'll then invade Poland, and then America have to get involved. That's not true. We know that's not going to happen. Russia doesn't have any interest in Poland. And Poland's already made the announcement, the prime minister there, saying that helping Ukraine is like a drowning person. You trying to save a drowning person, and they pull you down too. He's already hands off of them. Okay. So while Ukrainians are dying on the front lines, now this is where it gets dark. Zelensky's lobbying U.S. financial firms. This is all about money for him. This puppet, this little worm. So in the article it says, to the uninitiated, Rebuild Ukraine sounds like a completely logical and legitimate initiative in the wake of devastating war. However, Zelensky hasn't just been meeting with the average firm. He has been actively preparing the ground for New York-based investment firm, guess who? BlackRock, to take over significant swaths of Ukrainian finances, primarily playing a lead role in advising Kiev on how to handle his post-war investments and funding. Does he really think he's going to win? His post-war investments and funding. So if you don't know, BlackRock is a notorious investment management firm that has worked closely with the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and World Bank to hyper privatize public assets, land, and infrastructure. They almost own everything. They've got their hands in everything. Them, Vanguard and State Street, they're all connected. They all own each other too. This is the dark of the dark evil overlords. They're the world's largest asset manager and manages trillions of dollars in assets across the West, and even act as an advisor to European banks. Naturally, it's also involved in lobbying Western officials, essentially dictating and creating policy for its own benefit. They own most all politicians, right and left. Right and left. You heard me. No one's coming to save you. On top of that, they're the ones pushing the ESG, right? The social credit score. They're pushing the trans stuff. They've got whole websites dedicated to this, like organizations, foundations dedicated to this stuff, pushing trans ideology. And they will pull your investment. They invest in all these companies. That's why you see Nike. That's why you see Disney. You see all these people, because BlackRock owns them. And they said they'll pull their investments if you don't push this ideology as well. Now, isn't it funny how all this is circling back? It's all full circle. So what is this thing really about, right? For me, what I'm just waiting for, I'm waiting for the false flag for them to use this as for the U.S. to go to war, to direct combat, right? This is the thing. What do you think really is going to happen? Ukraine versus Russia. Do you think Ukraine is actually winning? Like, is anybody out there in doubt that Russia's dominating? And they're just toying. They're just toying with them right now. They're not dominating. They're toying with them, because Russia is a nuclear power. They can push the easy button and end it all like this. They don't have to play games, but they are. They're being gentlemen. They're playing a game. They're toying with them. They're the greater force, because if they wanted to, they could demolish them right now and be over. Ball game. Zelensky, who? Right? So I'm just waiting for the false flag. Maybe October 4th, that message is coming through you on your phone. Maybe that has something to do with something that's going to happen, false flag. They want to test, make sure it's operating right. So when they launch the false flag, and I'm just theorizing here, America's notorious for it. You can go back through history. Tons of false flags we've conducted to start wars. Don't believe me? Google it. Duck, duck, go it. Whatever you want to do. We're notorious for it. It's our MO. So, again, with this, yeah, they took out the Wagner leader. That's right. I'm sure they did. Probably wasn't even Russia. They tried. I was hoping they'd throw a coup, is what I was actually thinking. But they failed the coup, and then they tried to pull another one, because they said that Vladimir said he would not attack or wouldn't assassinate the Wagner Group head, but then he winds up getting blown up. So moving on from that, no one's coming to save you. I say it all the time. You're your own hero. All those sort of things. So we'll see how this transpires. 2024 will be the verdict of how the rest of your life, whether how long or how short it, or my life as well, how long or how short it will be. I think. I feel like there's a lot more to come. Obviously 2020 gave them a taste and gave them a playbook, but you're going to see a lot more happening. And the sheep will sit there and say, no, everything's fine. It's not fine. You better get prepared. And while I'm on that, I actually got a good deal from Partial Safety that I want to share with you from the 22nd. So right now, It's the 22nd, right? Yeah. To the 25th, all the NB100 mask right here, except for the original variant, will be 30% off. So you can get this mask. This is the one I first showcased. I really like a lot. It has the full field of view. They have one with a mic system, voice amplifier in it there, but 30% off. You get extra canisters, all that. You can put eyeglasses kit. Guys always ask, can I get eyeglasses? This is the one you can get for it. So you can also has a drinking tube, canteen, all that good stuff. So it's loaded. I'll put the link for that below, but make sure 22nd. So right now to the 25th, you can get you a gas mask for 30% off. Phenomenal. I love these guys. They take care of my people. I love companies that take care of my people because, listen, I was about to work with a company the other day, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But it's something that I use. I use it because I don't promote anything I don't use. It's something I've been using for quite some time. We talked to the people. I didn't talk to them personally. My people did. Oh, they're all on board. But then they question my video content, and they're supposed to be conservative. You see this happens all the time. You see a lot of conservatives. Oh, yeah, we're pro-gun. They're not conservatives because they don't agree with my content, right? I'm sitting here telling the truth. I'm a truth seeker. But that's how these boys play. They'll pump you up. You're following them. You're liking their videos and all this, and they're not real conservatives. Being pro-2A doesn't mean you're a conservative. There's lots of Democrats that love guns, lots of them. So anyway, I ain't gonna let the cat. I'm giving benefit of the doubt. We're gonna wait a moment, but I'm telling you, it happens all the time. So the people that work with me, like these people, and give my people the hookup, 30% off. Man, you can't beat that. So I'll put that link, post it. And guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff. Let me know your thoughts on Colonel Douglas McGregor, and add to it. Add to what I've said, my thoughts about what he said. Add some commentary to it in the comments. If you agree, you don't agree, it doesn't matter. Maybe you know more, think more. Maybe you have a better theory or a hypothesis. Let us know in the comments, guys. And remember to stay frosty, guys. Stay strapped. Stay dangerous. Take care.